1 week season.
Hey, and welcome in, OWS fam. So glad you are back with us as we are back once again in the DFS lab. As always, this is presented by 1 week season, where we build a DraftKings lineup, use it to talk through the upcoming, in this case, week 12. It is Thursday, the 21st of November, when you'll be watching this, though we are recording it late on Tuesday night. It's about 11 Eastern on the East Coast Tuesday night. So just keep that in mind when you're watching this Thursday. But of course, we always try to do everything we can to make this as sharp as possible. I'm your host, Cheeseman, and I am joined now by StatATL. And Stat, week 11, how was it? How did it turn out for you?
Week 11 wasn't great. It was kind of one of those weeks where, there were a couple plays that, like, if you just didn't have them, you just weren't able to compete for first. For me, I always play a pretty tight player pool, and a little bit frustrating. I think you and I were chatting during the week, or maybe even on Sunday itself, where it was just like, man, I've played, Taysom Hill every week since Shaheed and Olave have been out, and like this is the first week I didn't play him, and of course Taysom goes for some astronomical score, and he was owned, so you had to have him. Amon-Ra St. Brown goes for 40 points, again at some ownership, not 15%, but not 2. I think he was like 8 or 9% owned. So yeah, I mean, between them and Goff had some ownership at quarterback, over 5%. So, I had some Jameis Winston stacks for like one of my 4 stacks that I built around. So, those rosters, they cashed, but without Amon-Ra, without, Taysom Hill, without Jonnu Smith, who put up 30-something points, I think 31 points at tight end, also at some ownership, like around, wasn't high, maybe 5%, 6%. But like, if you didn't have any of those guys, and none of those 3 were in my pool, so it was a down week. I'm happy with the process. Like I was, we talked about it. I was super high on Pittsburgh. I thought that was a really good environment with Baltimore. Like literally every team has crushed them, and the Steelers just were the first team to like not really put up a big score. And I don't know that George Pickens killed you. I think he went like 8 for 89 or 7 for 79, something like that. So, not a horrible score. Again, was only like 2x his price because he was like 7K. But, you just needed some of those other pieces. If you had, Jonnu or Taysom, or it probably would have been pretty hard to fit Amon-Ra in that build too. But like, had you had one of those guys, like that lineup probably still could have cashed, even with kind of getting a middling result out of those guys. So not our best week, but it's about trusting the process and moving on. You got to choose fun. You got to enjoy. You got to enjoy the DFS.
What's up with the hat? I like that.
The hat. It's a lifestyle brand that buddy that I play hockey with. It's a company that he's just founded. It's I think literally I got this hat on Monday so yesterday at hockey, and I was his first paid customer. So he literally just launched the brand on Sunday night, and they've got an Instagram. If you guys want to check it out, anyone tuning in wants to check it out, it's Choose, CHOOZ, fun. I'm pretty sure they got a website as well. I think it's just choosefun.com. But Mike, here's your Choose Fun shout out, buddy.
Yeah, love it, man. I think it's a cool hat, and it's a cool kind of play on the the words kind of thing. Very creative. So yeah, man. Week 11, yeah, I mean, everything you said, rings true as well. The unpredictability and randomness of the NFL is undefeated. Of course, Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's like we've been trying to find the game environment all year where, he's going to get the targets he needs to hit. And of course, it was not a competitive game, but, he hit like probably one of his best DFS scores ever.
It was his career best game.
yeah, catching 11 out of 11 targets. Yeah, what can you do, man? And Taysom Hill, same boat as you. I'm just kicking myself. Like, how did I just overlook Taysom Hill? But I actually felt pretty good about my process. And, you just, yeah, man, small sample size. So we move on to week 12. But we will quickly, let me just show the lineup that we did build from last week. And yeah, like, Pittsburgh just for whatever reason they just they were able to kick a lot of field goals, but obviously that does not help us for fantasy.
Yeah, no, not our best week. I think we're now 5 or 6 out of 11 weeks, so not great. But again, our expectation is only right around 20%, so we'd only expect to have cashed 2 weeks so far. So still beating the curve there. And we'll get on it again this week, and we'll try to build a tournament winning roster, or at least we'll talk through the process of what that looks like, at least for us.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll pull up DraftKings here. I have got the red zone already pulled up, the $50 entry fee red zone, and that is, let's see, what is that to first? Just it was right there, 25K to first. So. Yeah, we're looking at week 12. Let me just pull up my notes for a second here. Looking at this, you have a lot of the big QBs that are not on the slate this week. You got some good team totals. I'll give you a game that I like. It's not like one of the higher total games, but I do like to look at like a team that's at home. It's a big favorite. I wish that I would have looked. And it recency bias. I wish I would have looked a little more closely at Detroit, but I just was so in the mindset of, man, their fantasy scores are always too spread out. So no one's going to get there for the Lions. But you got Houston at home against Tennessee, and they're very big favorites and a very lofty team total. So again, if you were going to try to go back to like a team overstack type of situation, and try to just capture, say the Texans are going to score 4 or 5 touchdowns, or even 6, and you try to capture all of that at home, and they say they finally get the offense going. This is an offense that really has underperformed so far to what we kind of expected, certainly the passing offense. Maybe they finally get it going at home, just favored by a lot, and you're able to capture all of that. That's something that I definitely will at least look at, but it's still early. So what are kind of some of your thoughts? What are some spots that you like so far in week 12?
Well, yeah, sure. So it's kind of fresh top of mind because on Tuesdays I do my first look, out on the OWS like Discord, like Inner Circle Discord already. I think probably posted out to Twitter by the time you're watching this video for sure. Probably Tuesday night or Wednesday will be out on Twitter/X. I've also got a first look video that I recorded earlier today as well. So if you haven't seen that, check it out. Cheese will let you know.
Check it out.
Top corner right somewhere over there. First look video there. But yeah, so in kind of my rundown there were like, I think I had 3 environments that I kind of highlighted as my favorite of the 10. Obviously, there are spots that you can consider as well. Obviously the Texans, I think, have like a 25-point team total that you highlighted. Wasn't one that stood out to me just because I feel like the Titans have been better than most people have, than you give them credit for on defense. Like they just haven't allowed a lot of fantasy scores.
It is true. Yeah.
Doesn't mean it can't happen. I was really high on the Seahawks and Cardinals game. I felt like that was like a really good environment. One that I would consider building around. I like the 49ers and Packers. I felt like that was a game that you could really build around as well. Some underpriced pieces there. I think the field is probably going to gravitate towards the Chiefs. Like they're like a 27-point team total, I think. I don't know. I don't know that that's a spot that I'm personally going to build around. I'm not a big fan of playing Patrick Mahomes like the last 2 seasons. Like, I think he's had like literally 1 game in the last season and a half where he's put up a score that like hurt you for not playing him, like a 30. Like I think he's maybe hit 30 points once. So that's not going to be for me. But I also really do like the Lions and the Colts. Like I think I think that's in a game environment that you could build around the two primary pieces of like the Colts offense are pretty reasonably priced. So I think that's a game I'd consider building around as well. I think those are probably my three favorites. And so, I think kind of one of these weeks where there's only 3 games in the afternoon, but I mean, I feel like this is a week where you could play instead of like your full volume for the week, like maybe you split it up and play some full slate, but then some, early only and then afternoon only. Cause I feel like there are some really great spots to target that are more slate specific. Like on the smaller slate, if you were excluding those last 3 games, I think you could really lean into some game environments that might be a little too thin to play on a fuller 10 game slate.
Yeah.
But just something to consider when, you're building your rosters is, what slate, what tournament am I in for this slate? Is it something where I've got to be, closer to the optimal? Am I playing, the Millie Maker on the 10 game slate? Or am I playing a 2,000 person contest on the 3 game afternoon only slate? You'll have a little bit more flexibility. You still have to be pretty close because there's only limited options on a 3 game slate. But yeah, I mean, you could play some guys that probably you wouldn't consider on the full 10 game slate.
Do you ever do early only?
Rarely. I feel like a lot of times I focus more on afternoon only because I feel like, especially when there's 4 or 5 games in the afternoon, just because I feel like a lot of people who are entering afternoon only are doing it chasing what has happened in the early games. Like, my plays just didn't hit in early, so I'm going to play afternoon only.
I'm feeling very judged right now, Stat. I'm feeling very judged right now. I never do that. I definitely didn't do that this last weekend.
Definitely not. Definitely not. But
point well taken. It's true. When you actually, I mean, I've done that so many times. It's a lineup you build in about 5 minutes normally. And, any lineup you build in about 5 minutes, actually this is what Zandamir said when we were in the Monday Showdown focus show was any lineup you build in 5 minutes is not going to be very unique.
Yeah, I mean, if it comes together that quickly for you, generally, certainly for Showdown, and I haven't tuned into Monday's show with Zandamir. I mean, he's super sharp. I would feel like every time I get a chance to listen to the two of y'all.
We built on this past Monday, it won someone 10K. I mean, I think that they didn't watch the show, so they built it independent, but the lineup that Zandamir landed on, actually, I shouldn't say that. The lineup he landed on, the one he built for, was for a scenario where the Cowboys kept it close, but before he built that, he put together a quick Texans onslaught build to show what that could look like. Mm-hmm. And that ended up winning quite a bit of money for someone. It was probably I don't think it was the nuts. It was like a high, I'll bet you it won someone 10K and like a high entry fee, like smaller field, but still. Anyway, we digress.
Yeah, I mean, that's still got to be pretty close. You know what I mean? Like it's obviously not the optimal, but it's got to be reasonably close because even in those 2 or 3 or 500 person fields, like there's only so many like combinations of 6 players. Certainly when they build themselves as quickly as Zandamir typically kind of pumps those out, where he's just kind of talking through what makes sense. Yeah. And if you guys haven't checked those out, again, I think, geez, I'm giving you more work over here. You can put a link to that episode as well. I mean, Zandamir is so sharp. One of the pioneers, I guess, of the Showdown content. I mean, he's just really talked you through, how to properly build a roster, how to think through of how we're like not just picking players, but you're kind of talking through of how can this lineup be optimal? Like, what does that game environment look like? And a lot of times, like, people are just like, oh, I've got 6,200 left. This guy's 6K. Let me plug him in. Well, that doesn't make sense for how the other 5 players of your lineup are constructed. Like,
yes,
could that plan out? Yeah, I mean, I guess it could. It's Showdown. It's one game. It could. But, like, there's just, like, the logic behind it just isn't there. So it's one of the edges that I think still exists in Showdown. And so If you're not listening to that content, if you're not reading Zandamir's weekly breakdowns for those island game slates, I think you're doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And again, at top right corner, and even though like the game has already passed, he still just talks through a lot of theory related things that can apply, that just generally apply to building good showdown lineups. And so even though it's like, oh, it's focused on the Dallas and Texans game on Monday, you could use that same logic to apply to almost any slate. So definitely worth a listen, even if the game's already passed, if you want to just pick up some good thoughts. So yeah, good stuff, man. Good shout. Anyway, back to what you were saying, just the oh, that's right. I asked you if you ever did the early only stuff, and yeah, on occasion you said you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I think that it's an interesting way to approach a slate, and I think it's a good way. So like DFS is really hard, and I think people are very quick to kind of show their wins, the screenshot life. I think people are very quick to talk about how they've been successful. And, all of us as contributors here at OWS have all had our fair share of wins. But what I think a lot of people don't talk about is how tough DFS is. So we're through 11 weeks. I personally have had 9 losing weeks. I've had 1 week that was slightly over break even and 1 week that I did pretty well, but I'm still down on the season.
Yeah, me too.
And, I've had seasons where, I've had multiple seasons where I've won tournaments. But then I've also had years where I've been a losing player for the whole year and, for the whole NFL season. And it's just because the sample size is so small. It's
very.
So, yeah, I mean, I think if you're having if you're in a little bit of a rut, where you feel like, oh, I've lost 5 or 6 weeks and I'm just not feeling it. I think JM is a big proponent of like taking a break, like taking the week off. And I'm not going to say that's not a good idea. When I feel like I'm in a little bit of a rut, I kind of change it up a little bit and say, okay, well, let me kind of get back to the basics. And instead of playing 100, 150 lineups on the full main slate, like I might just go the 20 max for the early only or the afternoon only, and just saying, okay, like, let me work on just a 3-game slate or a 7-game slate and kind of shrink this down and get back to kind of the basics and making sure that I'm thinking through the process as well. And so I'm going to put less money into play. And, I'm still getting, I'm still working through the process. I'm still saying sharp, but, I'm kind of looking at it from a different perspective, because I think sometimes you can really get in the weeds and get, I'm just, when you're in a little bit of a rut, sometimes it's just nice to kind of change it up and get a little bit of a fresh perspective, whether that's taking a break or whether that's maybe just scaling down your play and just doing something a little bit different. Doesn't necessarily mean that your process isn't a strong one or isn't working, but sometimes just taking a little bit of a break or doing something different for a week, I think can really be helpful.
Yeah, man, I absolutely love that perspective. And I just think that it's worth mentioning that, yeah, whatever it takes for you to kind of just, if you need if it's taking a week off, or like you said, kind of just changing things up a little bit, because the thing is, like, we're week 12. I think it's easy to get into a mindset of, oh, the season's kind of over, or like, I think a certain level of kind of exhaustion can set in for a lot of players at this point of the season. That excitement is worn off. And I remember JM said this, I think maybe, a couple of years ago, it was around week 4 or 5. And he said, a lot of players, like, their amount of effort they put in starts to trail off. And so but there's still 7 weeks left. And so it's like, don't just kind of mail it in for the next 7 weeks. And maybe it does mean resetting for a week or whatever you need to kind of say, hey, 7 weeks left, the season is not over, 7 more weeks to improve. And maybe one of these next 7 weeks is the one where you ship something, but you got to still continue to put in that high level of effort and focus, so it's good stuff, man. Kind of that halftime prep talk almost.
Yeah. And I mean, we're only like a week or a week from when this will be airing, from like my favorite slate of the season. Like, I love the Thanksgiving slate. I know we'll talk about that more in depth next week, but yeah, I mean, you got to keep your game sharp for that one, because that's, in my opinion, like the biggest, outside of like week 1, that is like the biggest edge of the season is that Thanksgiving slate.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm definitely stoked. We're almost there. So cool, man. Well, where do you want to start on this build?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, I think we should build around one of those three environments that we talked about, whether it's Seattle, Arizona, Green Bay, San Francisco, or Detroit and Indianapolis. And I think I want to approach this from the Indianapolis side. I think I want to build around that game.
Yeah. Let's do it.
And so, I think it stands out as like a strong spot for both quarterbacks, both Jared Goff and Anthony Richardson. If you look at the Colts, like just from, if we're looking at it from Goff's point of view, Colts have allowed a ton of quarterbacks like Caleb Williams, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, CJ Stroud, Josh Allen, Sam Darnold. They've all passed for at least 280 yards against the Colts. The only quarterbacks they've kept under 280 yards were Malik Willis, Tyler Huntley, Will Levis, and then Aaron Rodgers, who's 40 years old now. So basically all of the younger breed of quarterback have all done quite well against the Colts. So I do like Goff, coming off I think the best game of his career with 412 yards and 4 touchdowns. But I think I actually want to build around the other side of this game. And I'm really interested in Anthony Richardson. Multiple quarterbacks have thrown for 300 yards against the Lions already. And all 4 of the quarterbacks that they faced that had at least 4 rushing attempts. So that was like Mason Rudolph, Darnold, Kyler Murray, and Baker Mayfield, all rushed for like 30 or more yards. I think 2 of them had rushing scores. So I think that's a spot that I want to kind of target. He's still super cheap at 5,600. Easily has 20 to 25 points, if not more, in his range of outcomes. So I really do. I like starting with Anthony Richardson here. I don't think this will be a popular way that people will go. They'll see that red 6th, next to him and say, oh, this is a tough matchup. I don't know that I want to go there. And I think that he just pairs so well with Josh Downs. The Lions, I think, have allowed an opposing wide receiver to eclipse 100 receiving yards in literally half their games this season. Josh Downs has seen 9 targets like on 2/3 of his game. And so I expect this to be, a trailing game script for Indy. So I think this is a good spot where we're going to see Josh Downs see probably double-digit targets. And I think that Anthony Richardson, if they're keeping this game competitive, which is what we're going to build around, I think you're getting a game where Richardson is involved with his legs, and you're getting a ceiling game from Downs. And so, whenever you're putting a roster together, like that's what you're playing for. If this were to hit, am I setting myself up for a clear path to first place? Like, could this completely fail? Could Richardson get you 12 points and Downs go, 5 for 40 and no touchdown? Yes, absolutely. But you know what? If that's the case, like the rest of the roster doesn't matter because this roster isn't winning. But since that's our goal is to win a tournament, that's where all the money is. We're kind of going to go all in here. So I kind of want to run this back with 2 different Lions. And so I think probably want to continue to be a little conscious of salary. And so I want to go with Jameson Williams, who has, multiple 25-plus point games already this season. And I want to run it back with Sam Laporta. I think that's an interesting spot. I think he is intriguing at 4,300. Obviously, he had a shoulder injury, so we got to make sure that he's back and active. But the Colts have already given up like a couple of notable games to tight ends already. Like Cole Kmet went for 97 yards and a touchdown against them. Jonnu Smith went for 96 yards and a touchdown against them. So I think this is clearly a spot where Sam Laporta could give you that 15 to 20 points, give you that 4 to 5x score. At his score, it doesn't take a whole lot to give you 15 points. Could be 3 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown, and he's right there at 4x, and that's not a huge game. So I like this. I like this as a start.
Yep, absolutely love it, man. Yep, good start. Got the game stack going. So do you want to look at your defense next here? A couple of running backs, where you want to go?
Yeah, let's pencil in a defense. And so in my first look, like I identified 5. I always try to go a couple of I try to pick 1 or 2 expensive defenses, 1 or 2 kind of in that 28 to 3,200, 3,300 range. And then I try to identify a cheap defense. There was not a cheap defense that I liked this week. Doesn't mean that it can't get there. Defense is a super variant position. But for me, like the Broncos were the cheapest defense that I was excited to play. So let's plug them in here just as kind of a placeholder. And if we end up with some extra salary or we want to get some correlation, we could certainly look to pay up a little bit more. But I think that's a good spot for now. In going through my first look, like there were like 4 or 5 running backs that I felt were really underpriced for their potential roles. And so I think on this build, like I want to get at least 2, probably 3 of them into this lineup. And I think the very first one, like if we're starting, taking a bottom-up approach, as those who are OWS subscribers are quite familiar with.
Yes.
I think bottom-up build is Brian Robinson going against Dallas. Like Dallas has been absolutely shredded on the ground. We just saw Joe Mixon go for 100 yards and 3 touchdowns against them last night or Monday night if you're watching this on Thursday. So it's just at 5,600, he is just severely underpriced, in my opinion. The next guy you can consider, I would say, is probably Kareem Hunt. Like, I don't understand why he's $1,000 cheaper than he was last week. He's averaging 22 opportunities a game. I understand that Isaiah Pacheco likely to be activated off IR, likely to make his return. But this is a game that, Kansas City should likely control easily. I think they're an 11 or 12 point favorite. So I just don't see a need or a situation where I think the Chiefs are going to, not ramp Pacheco up. Like I just don't see him getting 15 or 20 touches. Like this is a game that they should win by double digits. But maybe that's a little pumping the brakes on Hunt, but early on, he'll definitely be in my player pool. Kind of the next guy is Tyrone Tracy at 6K. The Giants are starting Tommy, aka Danny DeVito, this week, and I think that they're going to want to lean on Tyrone Tracy, who, as you are looking at the game logs here, he's seeing the touches. They're giving him opportunity. He's involved in the pass game, and he's 6K. And he's going against the Tampa Bay defense that's been shredded against opposing running backs this year. So I just think that he's just underpriced, and so a guy that I want to get in there as well. So let's pencil him in and see what that leaves us with left. So a good amount of salary here for the last 2 positions. So for me, I probably want to get some pieces either from the San Francisco Green Bay game or the Arizona Seattle game. I think those are my 2 other favorite game environments. So let's look for a mini correlation there. If we're considering Christian McCaffrey, if you don't mind, let's plug in CMC. He's pretty expensive. What does that kind of leave us with? 4,600. I think that you could consider Romeo Doubs. I think that would be a good correlation to consider. He's had some ceiling type games. Again, you're looking at he's got a 4,500 salary, so an 18-point game is a 4x his salary, and I saw 3 of those games I think in his repertoire so far this season. So I think that's viable. 17, 19. All right, maybe it's just 2. So I think that's viable.
Yeah, viable. Absolutely
viable. I think if you went off of Christian McCaffrey and you went to Jawan Jennings at wide receiver, I think that's something I would consider here as well. He's he's just underpriced for his role. At 7,500, that basically gets you to be able to play any Packer that you want. I don't know that we can do that without kind of reworking our entire roster. I don't know. Jaden Reed, I think, is like 5,900. So if I did that, I still don't have enough to get up to Amon-Ra St. Brown from Jameson Williams. So I don't know that that's what I want to do. I don't know that that's the best building of salary. So let's look at the other game. And so I think the matchup through the air is really strong for Seattle. Geno Smith is, I think, attempting the most passes per game, like on average of any quarterback in the league at like 37.5 per game.
Yeah.
And so, I think, targeting either Jackson Smith-Njigba or DK Metcalf, both of them are averaging like 8.5 to 9 targets a game. So let's throw in like DK Metcalf here and see what that does for us. I think he's kind of mid sixes.
There we go. Metcalf
would leave us 6,500 left. And that, like, just honestly, that's almost built itself perfectly with James Conner. A guy who's seeing 19 opportunities a game. Seattle has given up some big games to opposing running backs already this year. So I do really like that. I think Seattle's like allowed a whole slew, like it's like CMC and Kyron, James Cook, like Bijan Robinson, Garendo, Tyron Tracy, who else? Antonio Gibson, Ramondre Stevenson, like a ton of guys have gone for at least 90 yards against them. And like Gibbs and Montgomery, I think like totaled 160 against them as well, like, combined. So,
yep, there it is. Gibson, Ramondre. Yeah, that's H.
Nothing there. All right. So
Tracy, 18 for 129.
Yeah, 129. Garendo at 99. Bijan, James Cook, Kyron Williams had 69 and 26, so like 95 combined yards. And then last week, CMC went over 100 total yards as well. So, I think this is a good spot for James Conner. He's still seeing a vast majority of the backfield work. So I like this. I think we ended up on a good spot here.
No, I love Conner. Love him in that game environment. He's very consistent. Hasn't put up a ceiling game yet. So, it's there. Would it surprise anyone if he went for 30 plus? It wouldn't. So, yeah, man.
And this is this is a big game in the NFC West.
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Arizona's actually leading this division, and Seattle is only one game back. I think the 49ers are actually in last place in that division. So,
yeah, they're 6-4. Cardinals are 6-4, and then I think everyone else is 5-5.
5-5. Yeah.
Yeah.
So big game in that division for sure. So
yeah, and those teams below first in the division are probably not making the playoffs. So you got to win the division, and then if not, you're not probably not making the playoffs. So yeah, it's very big. So yeah, dude, great stuff. So what we landed on, podcast listeners, Anthony Richardson with Bijan and Tyron Tracy, the two running backs, Josh Downs paired with Richardson, Jameson Williams, DK Metcalf, Sam Laporta. You see the game stacking there with the Indy Detroit game. And then the flex James Conner and the Broncos defense. And, of course, Conner and Metcalf, the mini correlation there. Stat, great stuff. Anything else you want to add?
Nope, just hoping to see some more OWS avatars at top of leaderboards again this week. Hopefully yours and I's as well, buddy.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Yeah, I felt great about my process last weekend, and hopefully I can just repeat that and not overlook someone like Taysom Hill again. But guys, great luck ahead for week 12. Enjoy it, and obviously on the other side of it, Thanksgiving coming up. So Stat, we'll look forward to next week, man. We'll be talking through some Thanksgiving next weekend or next week.
Yep, cheers.
All right, see you guys.